welcome to the question of the day. Today's question is from Bruce in Louisiana. And Bruce asks, I'm having trouble getting my team to adopt our process. Specifically, it seems to hover around one guy, but I feel like the attitude is spreading to the rest. How can I get them to do the process that we laid out? Great question. You're talking about accountability. Specifically, this seems to be an individual rather than the whole team, but there's a big risk of this becoming the whole team because when we lack accountability and there's a negative mindset or a negative attitude or we're shirking the process, if we don't hold accountable to that, we're at risk of this spreading like a cancer. And before we know it, it goes from just one person not executing the process to everybody not executing the process. And that's a lot harder to recapture than just one person if I were to nip this in the bud. Because if this was a whole team, right, I would say we got to start with defining what our process is, clearly communicating that, riding along, training one on one, having call debriefs, win the day, setting up goals and alignment of this process. Like we'd be going through the whole gamut here. But as we dive into this, what I want to do is I want to lay out one thing you specifically do not want to do. And then I want to cover one thing that you specifically do want to do. But before I get to those, let's start with guardrails. What are the guardrails of your company? Do you have guardrails in your company? Guardrails are the things everyone has to do, regardless of your performance, regardless of who you are. Like you have to do these things. And the term guardrails comes from like a road, right? Like on a road, you can kind of drive however you want. You could drive all over the road if you wanted to. That's like your flexibility. That's your make it your own, right? But then there's guardrails too. So when there's guardrails on the side of the road, you can't drive through those. You'll wreck the car. You'll come to a stop. And so those guardrails are the expectations to work here. So these are defined by ownership, by leadership, and they have leadership support. Like we're all in alignment at the leadership level down that these are the guardrails. Everyone who works here must be willing to do these things. And if you don't have that defined sales process of what those guardrails are, well, you need one. You need that first. It has to be written down. It has to be trained. It has to be reviewed. It has to be communicated. It has to be constant. It's the price to work here. So some examples would be like, think of Chick-fil-A. When you walk into Chick-fil-A, everybody you encounter says, it would be my pleasure. That's a guardrail. There's no exception. You have to say that. There's another company that I used to coach, and their whole branding is tied into pink, and they wear pink. And their slogan is that you better be good because everybody sees you in pink. Like that's their whole thing. And right in their interview process, they ask people, how do you look in pink? You're asking these burly plumbers, how do you look in pink? Because everybody's got to be bought in on pink. They got to be excited about pink. That's a guardrail. That's a price to work there. Now, here's the thing not to do. The thing not to do is to rather than address this individually, address it as a whole team. Sometimes we take on these issues and we think if we cover this with this blanket statement that we're clearly communicating and that we're holding the team accountable, right? And an example of this would be we have a meeting and somebody's late to the meeting, right? And we say something like, hey, reminder to everyone, not naming names here, but reminder, these meetings are mandatory. Everybody needs to show up at 9 o'clock. They start at 9 o'clock. Everybody knows who you're talking about. Everybody knows who was late to the meeting or who's consistently late to the meeting. And now what they know is that you're too scared to have that conversation with that individual, that you'd rather address it with everybody than have that conversation. Another example, we're not executing part of the process. Okay. So, hey, reminder everybody that, again, not naming names, but we need to do our visual agendas when we start off a call. Well, if I'm sitting in that meeting and I'm like, well, I do my agenda, and I rode along with Joe yesterday, he did his agenda, must be talking about Larry, right? Now we know you're talking about Larry. And again, I know you're too scared to have that conversation with Larry. I worked with a company a while ago, and we were working on their tracker. And this tracker, I thought it was kind of cumbersome because this company would sell things, and usually it would be X amount of things. There would be an X quantity of things. But occasionally it would be a different quantity of things. Now, to change the quantity in the sales tool, you had to get a manager who wasn't readily available all the time. You had to get a manager to come in and modify the quantity. And I said, well, wouldn't it be easy if the employees had that ability that they could just change the quantity in the system to whatever they're selling so that we could sell it? It would adjust the price and everything, right? And I was like, I know I'm not like an IT computer person, but that seems pretty easy to me. Like you have a drop down that you select the quantity, it puts the right price, and you make the sale. Like that would be easy. And what I was told that, well, we didn't want to do that because we used to do that. And we caught some employees basically giving away free stuff, right? They would put in one quantity and give you another quantity. So they'd put in that they're charging you for four, but really they'd give you five. And this blew my mind. So like rather than holding these individuals accountable for stealing, basically, because you're giving away free product, right? That's stealing. Rather than hold them accountable for stealing, we designed an entire tool that now was cumbersome to everybody because every time I want to make a sale, I got to find my manager. I got to get him to adjust the quantity because you don't trust me to sell the right quantity, or not even trust, but you didn't have the guts to have that conversation with those individuals, either to establish the guardrails and hold them accountable, or if they're not going to follow the process, exit those employees. I now know that you're not going to have that conversation with the employees. So in all three of those examples I just walked through, everybody on your team knows you're too scared to hold them accountable. People don't follow leaders who are scared to hold people accountable. And this evolves into dissension. And you'll never be able to hold your team accountable to a process. So that's what not to do. Do not address this as a team issue if it's an individual issue. So now let's flip and let's talk about what to do. Great leaders are defined by the amount of difficult conversations that they have. I'm going to say that again because that's an important point. Great leaders are defined by the amount of difficult conversations that they have. You hold your individuals accountable in a one-on-one setting. So in a general setting, we're talking here about sales process. As a sales leader, I should be riding along with my team. I should be training my team, and I should have one-on-ones with my team. So when I'm riding along, I'm identifying opportunities. I'm seeing like, man, everybody struggled with X part of the process. That's what populates my trainings. Then when we have our team trainings, I train on X, whatever that opportunity was. Now everybody knows how to do X. And training, the most important part of training is the adoption that happens into the field after the training. If it doesn't actually adopt into the field, I just wasted everybody's time and everybody's money because nothing actually changed in the field. So I want to make sure that adoption happens in the field. And so that's where the ride-alongs come in again. If I'm doing consistent ride-alongs, whatever I trained this week, when I'm riding along, I should see these things adopting into the field now. I'm looking for them specifically. And if I don't see them, that's where in a one-on-one setting or in my one-on-one with the individual, I would address this. And this is exactly how I would address this. I would say, let's say it's, for this example, let's say it's the presentation, right? So we just went over and defined this is what our presentation looks like. We practiced it until we were blue in the face. Now I'm expecting this is the presentation that we execute with our customers. And so I ride along and I see, well, that process didn't happen. And so in that one-on-one conversation, I would just say to the individual, hey, I noticed on the call we ran together that you didn't use that presentation process that we trained this week. Tell me about that. Very non-confrontational, but addressing the issue and opening it up for that employee to talk to me about it. I'm not beating them over the head, but this conversation is going to go two ways. There's one of two ways this conversation is going to go. The first way is going to be the employee says something like, I don't know it, or I feel uncomfortable with it. Hey, that's great. I'm fine with that. Like, I don't expect anybody to like pick this stuff up right away if we've never been doing it before, right? Like we're going to practice, but usually we don't have enough practice time. So I get it. It just means we need more practice. And now I, as a leader, am going to make a decision. Does the whole team need to go back? Do we need to spend another training on this, another practice session on this? Or as an individual, let's sit down. Let's work together one-on-one. Let's practice. Practice until we can't get it wrong. That's great. And that's what a great leader does. You suss that out. You identify, hey, I'm not comfortable with this yet. Great. Let's practice until you are comfortable so that we can get adoption into the field. Now, the second way this conversation is going to go is going to be some version of it's a dumb process and I don't agree with it. Okay. So that's going to sound like, well, I don't say it that way, or I do it different, or something like that. This is a whole different conversation. And this is where you need to have those guardrails set, the price to work here. Everybody here is expected to do those things. Because I'm open to having my thinking challenged. I'm open to having the guardrails challenged. I'm open to all of that. We can have that conversation. I'm okay with that. But I want to be very clear with my employees that when I'm open to having that conversation, I want it done in a one-on-one setting, not in front of the team. I do not want this conversation happening in front of the team. I do not want complaining or negative attitudes happening in front of the team. I want this conversation happening in my office, one-on-one, not in front of the team. And honestly, you can spend, as an employee, you can spend every one-on-one, every day trying to change my mind or change leadership's mind on a process. I'm fine with that. We can have those conversations. If you can prove to me with data that your process works better, great. Let's adopt that as a new process then. I'm open to that. Because I don't really care. It's not an ego thing if it's my process. Like honestly, none of this stuff is my process anyways. I got this from others that had data that it worked for them. So it's not an ego thing. If your way works better and there's data to prove that, great. Let's do it. I don't need my name attached to it. That's called innovation. That's how we come up with new processes, how we move the needle. I love innovation. But if not, if you can't prove it with data, if you can't change my mind, if we can't change leadership's mind, then we have to agree to both leave this room and carry the flag for whatever that company process still is. You're going to execute it in the field, and no one should be able to tell that you disagree with that process. You're going to be as positive and rah-rah about that process as you would of your own ideas. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing. The owner of the company, they're paying for all the leads. They're paying for everything. So that earns them the right to set the rules, to set the process, to set those guardrails. The rest of us, we either get to execute that process or change their mind. That's it. And until you change their mind, you execute the process. So If you're a leader listening to this, lean into those difficult conversations. A great leader is defined by the amount of difficult conversations they're willing to have. If you're a salesperson listening to this, execute your process or respectfully change your leader's mind. But until then, execute the process. That's today's question of the day. If you're enjoying question of the day, follow, share, give a rating. Question of the day is on major streaming platforms. If you have a question, reach out to me either on social media or email. Both are going to be listed in the show description. Let's get your question answered. And if you're a Nexstar member, schedule a call with me. Let's get this addressed one-on-one and get very specific to your situation. I'm Coach Chris. We will see you tomorrow.